going to give a more politically correct answer at this point, I bet.
That's my guess. What it says.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza? What do you think it's going to say?
I'm guessing politically correct answer. Some argue yes, some say no.
Let's see. This must be like constantly being questioned now. I mean, it must be.
I'm sure, yes.
It must have a bunch of different. Oh, it's giving us a slow trickle.
Well, I've been in expert mode, so it's thinking.
Oh, searching the web. Okay. It's going to Amnesty International, December 2024. Report concludes Israel is committing genocide, citing killings and harmful conditions. So now it's saying it's citing the sources. Many human rights organizations and UN reports suggest genocide, citing deaths and destruction.
It's just thinking.
Right, I get it. So now then it'll eventually evaluate.
It'll eventually spit out an answer.
Meanwhile, if you ask it an impossible trigonometry problem, it'll give you the answer instantaneously. Okay, here it goes. Term genocide is defined, 1948 UN Convention, the prevention and punishment of the crimes of genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. These acts include killing members of the group. Okay, the ongoing conflict in Gaza stems from, I get it, I know what that is. Okay, allegations of genocide, prohibited acts, intents. So it's giving you a very nuanced response. International Court of Justice, in response to South Africa's case filed in December 2023, ruled in January 2024 that genocide claims are plausible and issued provisional measures ordering Israel to prevent genocidal acts. And this is quite a while ago in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, scroll down. Notable deniers. Israel's government calls accusations baseless and outrageous, emphasizing compliance with international law and investigations into misconduct. The U.S. has described claims as unfounded. Analysis like the BESA Center report, July 2025, and ACJ 2025 July argue no evidence of starvation, massacres, or disproportionate strikes and criticize data manipulation by Hamas. Contextual challenges. Urban warfare against embodied insurgency complicates operations. Accusations ignore Hamas's role in aid diversion and civilian endangerment. Some scholars note that while harm is severe, competing motives like counterterrorism preclude genocide findings. The issue remains highly contested and politically charged. While human rights bodies and ICJ have found plausibility in genocide claims warranting preventive measures, no international court has issued a final guilty verdict, and determinations hinge on ongoing investigations. Yeah, I don't know, man. It sounds like a different answer.
I mean, whatever.
It's very,
that's
very
a reasonable
nuanced.
enough. Yeah,
it's very nuanced. It allows you to form your own opinion based on what many people say, including what Israel says. So it's not going to give you an answer. It's essentially saying, figure it out.
Which I don't have a problem with that.
I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, that's what I would like it to do, especially if there's debate.
Well, also, I mean, I think one of the, the real problems, and this is why I kind of avoided using the term genocide too much, at least in the beginning, is that there's no good definition for genocide. That definition they gave you at the beginning is the official codified under international law definition. Right. It's attempting to destroy a group in whole or in part.
Right.
Well, what the hell does that mean? And that's why they could say, Hamas committed a genocide on October 7th. It's I don't know, they destroyed a group in part. And the whole South African case that they brought to the ICJ was basically the entire case was just the Israelis in their own words. Their argument was that there's a genocidal intent here. When Benjamin Netanyahu's talking to a group of military and calls them Amalek, well, what? The story of Amalek from the Bible is that the moral of the story was you have to kill all the women and children. That's what the story was about. I think you even had to kill the ox or something like that. I'm not an expert in the Bible, but it was that was the point. It was an ancient tribe that was beefing with the Israelites, and they were the moral was you have to kill all the women and children too. And that's a crazy thing to say at the beginning of a war. But the thing is that whether you consider what Israel's doing a genocide or you just take the moderate position of former Israeli prime ministers who say it's war crimes, I think the bigger point is just like, it is so horrifically evil. And no one should support this. It's crazy. It is so insane to support Israel doing this to what are, in effect, their own people. Now, they may not consider them their own people, but I don't care what they consider. I care what they have power over. Hitler maybe didn't consider the Jews his own people, but it doesn't matter, dude. Once you have control of that country, those people are your people. Like, you have an obligation to them. Israel has had control of Gaza since 1967. They've been the sovereign, and all the way through. People could talk about the disengagement in 2005, but that doesn't mean anything. They still controlled the whole strip. They just didn't have their soldiers inside. They had them around the perimeter. Doesn't matter. You're still controlling those people. And so, like, if you have resistance, even violent resistance, to a 60-year-long occupation, you don't get to just say, like, all right, we'll just turn off electricity to the whole place. We'll just cut off water to the whole place. We'll let no food in for 3 straight months. Not one grain of wheat got into Gaza. And that, by the way, is a direct quote from their finance minister, Smotrich. And not one grain of wheat will get in. And then a few months later, you go, oh, no, but the people starving, they had pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, it's
like,
a hoax.
Come on, man. Like, what are we doing here? And particularly when it's like, it's just very obvious that this doesn't serve our country's interest in any way at all. I was listening to Netanyahu's an interview he did the other day. He was on with our friend Konstantin Kasen on trigonometry, and what was he saying at one point? He goes, "We're fighting Hamas, so you don't have to," or something. Like, does anybody believe that Hamas was about to mount an attack on the United States of America? They were going to take over if it wasn't for Israel sticking up for us and just destroying the entire strip. And it's ridiculous. It's like, you'll still, to this day, I'll be in like a debate or like a panel or something like that, and someone will still start with the question, like, do you think Israel has the right to exist? And isn't it amazing that over the last 2 years, that's been the question that's asked so much, when very clearly a more relevant question would have been, does Gaza have a right to exist? Because it doesn't now. That was the only existence that was ever up for debate. But they flip the thing around and go, well, you don't think Israel has a right to exist? You're like, first of all, I don't think governments have rights at all. I think that's a totally incoherent worldview. And the only coherent worldview is that individuals have rights. There aren't like these massive right. It's like Mitt Romney saying corporations are people or something like that. But I think all people have the right to exist. I think Israel does not have a right to do what it's doing to Gaza. And, and
the real question is, how does this end?
No, it seems to be with ethnically cleansing the entire strip. Seems the most likely bet right now.
And then what do they do with Gaza? Like, how long is it going to take before that even looks normal again?
Well, I mean, I don't...
look at the massive destruction, just the sheer scope of it.
Yeah, it's like 80% of the structures have been leveled.
So crazy. If anybody flying over that with a drone and they tell you that's the only way they could have done this, that seems nuts.
Yeah.
And the fact they keep doing it, it's like, how does this end? Like, what happens if the, Israel's publicly said, and Netanyahu talked about it on the podcast, that they're losing the PR, or what do you call it? Did you say PR propaganda?
Yeah, something like the PR
campaign. But what does that mean? It means the people see what's going on and they don't support it, and you think they're wrong. Okay, well, how much further can you go with this before everybody disagrees? Yeah,
and well, also part of the reason why, people, it's like, because, I don't know, people have you don't have the controlled propaganda apparatus anymore. And so the thing is now, for the people, like, obviously there are still a lot of people who just don't really pay attention, that deeply. But for somebody who's listening, let's say, to Netanyahu's interview with Konstantin, I'd have to say, like, a large portion of them at this point, you're listening to podcasts about politics, right? Like, you're not completely removed from this world. There have been so many Israel-Palestine debates over the last 2 years. It's almost everyone who's watching this has at least seen what some competent person on the other side of this issue has had to say.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the times, they brought up at one point, and they really did, I thought Konstantin did a reasonably good job in the interview. The two, I forget his, what's his partner's name? Francis. The two of them, I thought they did all right. I thought they were a little, there were times they could have asked some follow-up questions, particularly the one that I thought they let him off the hook with was when they asked him about his support for Hamas. And they just totally let him go like, oh, well, we needed to make sure that people weren't suffering too bad and let some aid in. And it's like, no, dude, that's not. And the thing is that so many people listening to this have already heard this explained. You know what I mean? Where it's like I remember like a couple years ago where I was when I was talking with you, I was saying, hey, Coleman Hughes got this all wrong when he was on your podcast, and Coleman Hughes had basically said there's one quote that's attributed to Netanyahu, but like it wasn't on video or anything like that. And I was like, no, dude, this case is much bigger than one quote that was attributed to him. By the way, since then, a video came out of him saying it on video. There's actually a video now of that quote. It's not just the reports.
What is the quote?
Well, the quote that was they had the video of was that we can control the height of the flame. So he was basically saying, like, we can commit. The quote that originally he said, which was in a closed-door Knesset meeting with Likud party members, where there were like 3 people who were eyewitnesses who came and told him. It was originally reported in the Jerusalem Post, was that he was like, look, anybody who wants to thwart the existence of a Palestinian state has to support our plan of propping up Hamas and transferring money to them, because this is what gives us a no one to negotiate with certificate. And then he said, we can control the height of the flame. Meaning, like, I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I'm funding these terrorists right on our southern border, but, like, don't worry about it. We can control, the height of the flame. And then he found out he couldn't on October 7th. But so they let him off the hook with that, and people have just kind of heard this laid out. I mean, it's not like I just say this on podcasts. There's been major pieces written in the New York Times, in the Times of Israel, in Haaretz, in the Jerusalem Post, in the Washington Post. Like, this is all over the place. And he just goes, no, we were just like trying to get some funding in there for the people. Like, at this point, anyone believes that Benjamin Netanyahu was motivated by helping the poor people of Gaza rather than by thwarting a Palestinian state.
What was his response? Because I do know that they asked him about the failure of intelligence on October 7th. What was his response to the failure of just how long it took them to react to it?
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember thinking there was not much of substance to it. He kind of just danced around it, And they also didn't get into specifically, like, at first they started asking him questions about, like, what was it like for you on that day? But They didn't get into questions about, like, why was the response time so long? How was this possibly able to happen?
They didn't ask that?
No, not really. I mean, they didn't push him on that. And then he, said, which, I mean, just think about how unimpressive this is that he basically just went, oh, there should be a full investigation. There should be a full investigation onto that from the top all the way down to the bottom.
Nice thing to say.
And you're like, okay, hey, this would be awesome. Could we get the Prime Minister of Israel on the line? Because, like, maybe he could do something about this. So they're like, oh, no, that's you. So, like, why? It's almost 2 years later. What are you talking about, dude? Have the investigation. What, you can't conduct an investigation while you're destroying the Gaza Strip? What does it have to wait till after that? You got time to do a podcast.
Did they ask him about the protests?
I don't think so. But, I don't...
Because there were protests before October 7th.
Yes, there's also been protests this week.
Yeah.
By the way, massive protests in Tel Aviv. I think I read a few articles about it, and that the estimate seemed to be 500,000 people were out in the streets protesting the war. And thank God for that, man. And thank God for just like and oh, by the way, the protests were led, or I don't know, like led, but the featured acts at the protest were the families of hostages and surviving hostages. They're the ones leading the charge, being like, stop doing this. Because, like, if you think about it, I mean, could you imagine, if you try to put yourself in the place of, like, having someone you really love is a hostage, like Hamas has taken them hostage and they're trapped in one of these tunnels, and then you hear the plan is to cut off all food to the area, and you're like, yo, like, what? How is that going to help your loved one who's a hostage there? Like, how is it just bombing the place? Like, what if you hit them? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, this, it's like, obviously, if your main goal was hostage retrieval, this is not at all the way you would go about doing that. And, you know, it's like, this was a point, by the way, that Darryl Cooper was making on Tucker Carlson's podcast, which got him in a whole lot of trouble and got him a whole lot of pushback on. But I think the essence of his point was about starvation blockades. And then, like, saying, like, you know, you put a starvation blockade on Nazi Germany or something like that. You go, okay, because the Nazis are your enemies and they're real bad guys. So you want to do that. But, like, do you think Adolf Hitler's not eating? Do you think any of his soldiers aren't eating? I mean, that's going to be first priority, right? Nazi party members and the Nazi military are going to care. Who is maybe not going to get food? Probably the most disenfranchised people in that society, right?
They're already in a concentration camp.
Yeah. Well, some of them were, I guess, at that point, and some of them weren't. But
isn't it amazing that that's controversial to say? That this is not a nuanced discussion?
Yeah.
Like that's not a factor?
Yeah, that's right. And look, they were using, which was a horrible picture, but they had the image of one of those, there was like some pictures that had come out of one of the remaining hostages there who did look like, you know, in bad shape, looked like close to starvation, you know? And then the Israel supporters were using this as like their propaganda, like, look how horrible Hamas is, look what they're doing to them. And you're like, yeah, but this did come after 3 months of zero food being allowed into Gaza. And so, like, I don't know, to me it seems like it probably doesn't take a genius to go like, you know, Hamas is gonna be fed. Like, they're not going to suffer from these hunger strikes. And in fact, a lot of the pro-Israel people were, and the Israeli government themselves, they were making claims, a lot of them unsubstantiated, but making claims that, like, Hamas is stealing all of the food. We let aid in previously, but Hamas stole it all. Then they mark it up and charge more money for it to the people of Gaza. And you're like, okay, but then what does a food blockade do? I mean, you already said it's not taking food away from Hamas, right? So who's the war against? It's the civilian population. And of course, you'd imagine, like, just like under Nazi Germany, you'd imagine Jews and gypsies and they're going to get the worst treatment in a totally centralized war economy. The state is going to decide who eats and who doesn't eat. Who do you think they're going to pick? You know, it's like, this stuff just leads to, like, unbelievable amounts of human suffering. And it's
again, how does this end?
Well, I mean, you know, I guess there's some competing plans. Like, Donald Trump said kind of flippantly a few months back that America was going to take over the Gaza Strip and turn it into a big, beautiful property.
It sounded like he was talking shit.
Yeah, me too.
It was
that
weird,
was what I thought too.
He said it right beside Netanyahu, and it just seemed bizarre that he was doing that.
Very strange. But then Netanyahu said much more recently, just a week or two ago, said that Israel is going to take over the Gaza Strip. Which that sounds much more likely to me. You know, I think this is the weird dynamic kind of here is that I think they're not like so stupid that I'm aware of something that, like, these guys aren't aware of, right? Like, they know that they've lost control of the media. They know they've lost control of the narrative, and they know that they've lost control of the youth in America. And that at some point, you know, those 70-year-olds watching cable news are going to age out and die, and the people in charge are going to be this generation that has a totally different view of Israel than previous generations. They know that, but then the question becomes, like, what do you do with that information? And so I think that there is a part of Netanyahu and the Israeli war cabinet and the Israeli government who are looking at this and going, all right, so we got like 10 more years of this relationship. You know, we got like 10 more years of where the U.S. has our back and we can do whatever we want. And so you could see where the conclusion from that might be, we got to go for it now. Like, if you really do have this greater Israel project, well, right now, under the Trump administration, this is your moment. He has already vowed he's going to do whatever to support Israel. He is totally on your side. You have this administration. There's every last member of this administration supports Israel. So now's the time. Annex Gaza and the West Bank. And, you know, parts of Syria too, and whatever else they want to do. So I think they might be going for it, you know?